Adam and Eve hid among the trees, hearts pounding and minds racing. The garden around them was still beautiful. The sun glimmered on the rivers, the birds sang in the trees, and the animals wandered nearby. But everything felt different now. They could feel the change in themselves. They were afraid and ashamed, realizing they had disobeyed God. Suddenly, they heard a voice. It was calm, strong, and full of love. "Where art thou?" God called. Genesis 3 verse 9. Adam and Eve froze. The voice wasn't angry. It was gentle, yet it seemed to reach every part of their hearts. Adam spoke first, his voice trembling. "I heard thy voice in the garden, and I was afraid, because I was naked, and I hid myself." Genesis 3 verse 10. Eve whispered, We did what you told us not to do." God asked, "Who told thee that thou wast naked? Hast thou eaten of the tree, whereof I commanded thee that thou shouldest not eat?" Genesis 3 verse 11. Adam looked at Eve and then at God. "The woman whom thou gavest to be with me, she gave me of the tree, and I did eat." Genesis 3 verse 12. Eve lowered her head and said softly, "The serpent beguiled me, and I did eat." Genesis 3 verse 13. God spoke to the serpent first. He said that it would crawl on its belly and eat dust all the days of its life. Then God spoke to Eve. She would experience pain in childbirth, and her desire would be for her husband. To Adam, God said the ground would be cursed because of him, and he would have to work hard for food all his life. Genesis 3 verses 14 to 19. Life outside the garden would be harder, and everything would require effort and struggle. Even as Adam and Eve listened to God's words, they noticed something remarkable. God's voice was still full of care. Even though they had disobeyed, God loved them. He made garments of skin and clothed Adam and Eve to cover their nakedness. They were still his children, and his plan for the future had not ended. Before leaving the garden, Adam and Eve took a last look around. The rivers sparkled, the fruit trees swayed, and the animals played. But the garden that had once seemed endless and safe now felt distant. Every step they took away from it was heavy, filled with the knowledge that life would not always be easy, but also filled with hope because God was still with them. As they walked outside, Adam felt the roughness of the ground beneath his feet. Eve noticed the difference in the air. The breeze was stronger and the sunlight warmer. They had to learn how to grow food, how to care for themselves, and how to navigate this new world. They would face challenges, but they would also see God's care in everything they did. They remembered the animals they had played with, the rivers they had watched, and the trees they had admired. Now, they saw them in a new way, alive and vibrant, yet also reminding them that their choices have consequences. They would teach their children about God's instructions, about the importance of obeying, and about the love that never left them, even when they made mistakes. And so, Adam and Eve began their life outside the Garden of Eden. Life was harder now, but they carried with them memories of God's perfect creation, the lessons of disobedience, and the hope that one day God's plan for the world would be fulfilled. They had learned about choices, responsibility, shame, and fear, but also about God's care, love, and the promise that he would always guide them. Even though they had left the garden, God's love had not left them. They would work the ground, care for each other, and live in a world that required effort and patience. And every time they remembered the garden, they would remember God's voice, his instructions, and the love that would never let them go. This story teaches us that choices have consequences, that God's instructions are for our protection, and that even when we make mistakes, God's love and care continue. Life outside the garden was only the beginning of a long story that God would continue to guide.
Thank you for watching this story by Ted. Subscribe for more exciting Christian and Bible stories. Also share with your friends and drop a comment on what you learned. See you in the next one.